mentioned, we're here to discuss the increasing threat of fraud in the messaging channel space. This is an issue that is super high on the radar for all of us in this room, and it's increasingly a challenge, and it's leading to increasing distrust in messaging. And the industry and all the stakeholders in the industry, so we're talking about aggregators, operators, regulatory agencies, and law enforcement agencies, need to work better together in order to combat fraud. And that's what this panel is here to talk about today. And I think it's really great that we have a global brand with Katya. We have, with the other Katya, we have Barrick, which is sort of a regional perspective on the thing. And then we have both the Oman regulator and the Irish regulator coming at it from a sort of market level or country level perspective. And how do we bring all these different perspectives together, and what are those challenges? What are some best practices that we can talk about? And just, I'll tell an interesting anecdote from the last 2 days that we had a presentation from Microsoft, so a real global brand, and we had panels with aggregators, MNOs, all the industry here, and a common theme comes up, which is it's an international problem that's being tackled often at a regional level, which is leading to a lot of complexities around navigating different sets of rules in terms of how we validate, vet SMS sender IDs, and wouldn't it be great if there was a way to harmonize all of that? And I think that's what we'll explore today. And maybe I'll kick it off with you, Katya. Yeah, if that's okay. And maybe you can give us, we can dig into this a bit, some concrete examples around the challenges that you're seeing, and if you want to discuss a bit of the landscape from your perspective. I can give you my headset.
Hello?
There we go. All right.
Yeah,
okay.
Collaboration, you see, industry and regulators. That's the start. So, indeed, I think, to make it short, because the story on fraud and how it has evolved in our industry is quite long, but I think what is taking us to the place we are is how the explosion on the kind of attacks, sophistication, how it is impacting so many, all of the services, all the communication services, being traditional telco, and even the digital communications, and also how and I think that the most important change is how the fraud has started to impact not only the businesses, which for many years we've been suffering from it, but how it has shifted and started to impact end users, individuals like you and me. And of course, because we have obviously and unfortunately been a little bit unsuccessful on the industry, and maybe the little bit we can remove it, in solving the problem by ourselves, I think that's what has taken regulators to take a step forward and start to, try to find ways of protecting end users, because this is what is important to them. So when we are talking about fighting fraud, for many years, all operators, all businesses, all aggregators nowadays have some kind of platform processes, procedures to fight fraud. And there are also national regulations that are evolving and moving into different degrees of complexity to try and protect these end users. But the digital ecosystem is global. The fraud is global. So trying to address fraud from a pure national and on-site perspective is just wrong. It doesn't make sense. So I think that's where we have all started to realize that collaboration, beyond just chatting and sharing experiences, has to move on. And that's where we have also started discussing with different regulators and trying to get the regulatory bodies globally together in GIRAF, a global informal anti-fraud group of regulators. and also on the industry side with one consortium. So getting the industry together, not only aggregators and carriers and vendors and operators, also industry associations, such as GSMA and many others, to discuss, to really create a dialogue, industry and regulations, because without these, I think we're not going to make it work.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe I'll go to you, Sharon, next, and you can. So that's sort of the global and international perspective, and from a brand perspective, for sure. And we know that ComReg is now in the process of implementing a SMS Sender ID registry. So maybe you can give us a little bit of context around that. What led ComReg to take this step? What is ComReg hoping to achieve by it? And how do you recognize this regional or market level and international dynamic?
Okay. So I suppose ComReg have been working with industry for about 3 years looking at all of this, and the aim really we've taken is to nail down to plug every hole possible within our industry. So there's about 5 different voice interventions which have been mandated, and on the SMS side, we're building a sender ID registry, which aims to register every sender ID, like like a bank or anything that comes in as under their direct messages. And if once that is implemented in about three months' time, then anything that isn't registered will be modified and eventually blocked. So that should go some way towards rectifying a bit of trust in sender IDs. But I would agree with Katja that this has exploded. Like, I don't know if 4 years ago we could have known how large it was going to be. Actually, I was at a talk earlier where one woman said that countries should think about this as almost terrorism on their citizens, because it's an assault, and and people call them fraudsters, and I think we need to stop that. I think criminals is really the term we should be using, because it has moved into organised crime gangs, and they're certainly not waiting for legislation or trying to build up, how will I talk to them? They're agilely working together and selling each other products and training each other and sharing best practices. And if we don't do that as well, then we can't fight this.
Yeah. Actually, I'll come back to that, but maybe I think it's very interesting, Abdullah, for all of us. I'm going to assume that we probably have a pretty Eurocentric crowd and some North Americans here today. So we probably don't often hear the Middle Eastern perspective. And it'd be great for you to give us just a bit of a lowdown on what's taking place in the Oman market and how you're looking at this issue and addressing it.
Yes, of course. Talking about Oman, I can say that the way it's organized is, for example, we have the licensees, the operators, we have the aggregators, and we have the enterprises, businesses that want to send bulk SMS to their customers. In addition to this, we also have the international aggregators. We have international providers, link providers, and so I think the way, we're talking about how fast it has exploded and so on, but I think the ecosystem has become so diverse and so complex that, it's the time where the regulators have to step in. Because traditionally, we just, there was no regulation, so it was more of a self-regulation where the operators and the industry was trying to come up with the best practices and the solutions that could, address all the challenges. But now, more recently, what we've seen is, like the types of fraud have also diversified. We have SMS spoofing, we have phishing attacks, we have sender ID spoofing as well. So taking all of this into account, we've been more recently, working on some guidelines and also being part of, because we have to work together, as we said. So working with Giraffe, which is trying to develop something on an international level and trying to bring all the stakeholders on one platform. We have also been working on how to register sender IDs. Because the way it works is, for example, we have some of the operators who have preferences for some of the aggregators. So any enterprise who wants to let's say send bulk SMS to their customers would go to the SMS aggregator, and then they would register their brand, their sender ID, and and wherever there is no rules, for registering the sender IDs, we find that the operators, they have a process of whitelisting the sender IDs between themselves. But sometimes you have some enterprises who have local sender IDs common, which are between local and international sender IDs. Like some international banks, for example, who have customers in Oman who wish to send notifications to the customers. So those sender IDs are sometimes blocked by, let's say, some of the operators because they feel that those sender IDs should not be coming through the local routes and should be coming through the international routes. So all of those complexities combined, we have been now stepping in and trying to work on some guidelines that could organize the industry.
Good. I mean, we heard the word guidelines. I mentioned in the introduction that, I think that the panacea would be sort of a best practice guideline that we could implement at a more international level. Katia, I think you represent more of a regional perspective, and I know that you're a big champion of this idea of a best practice guideline.
I think this is a very good introduction into this. What I will try to say briefly, I unfortunately cannot present any national cases because we are not the best in fighting the fraud so far. But it's very good that we are part of BEREC, so the Association of All Regulatory Authorities. I'm actually co-chairing the Cybersecurity Working Group. And within this working group, we are really cooperating closely with all national regulators. I'm so happy that we also have Ofcom, who is really advanced in this area among us. And not only that, we also cooperate with the NIS Cooperation Group, which is the member states, actually. So that cooperation is maybe on a little bit higher, more political level. So we are expecting some concrete, let's say, guidelines also coming from that cooperation. And on the other side, we are also cooperating with ENISA. This, I guess, everybody here would be well familiar with the European Agency for Cybersecurity. And I think that from this cooperation, which was meant a lot, I think this is the only way we can succeed. I know that when you're here in Barcelona, you have the feeling that, you're only surrounded with these cybersecurity experts, and that, the whole world is like that, But when you go out, when you exit this sphere, unfortunately, it's not like that. So we lack experts. So a lot of panels have been already taken place and discussing exactly these issues. So with this lack of expertise, not a lot of people in this field, the cooperation is even more important. And the other thing I also think we need to mention here is education. We all are consumers and users, and we think that we need to start talking more about that. We need to introduce these topics into kindergartens, not in schools. Yeah, it has to start in the early stages. These are all, I think, very good initiatives that finally are, being discussed among us, and will hopefully, bring some results already in the future. At first, when I was invited to this panel, I said, oh yeah, okay, I had this similar really cute speech in January, I think, at the conference. I said, oh, I'll just, do some remake and use that one. And then yesterday I was thinking, oh no, this is totally outdated, So it's really fast. It's really evolving, especially with the AI. And I was very much surprised when I found out here at Barcelona that we already have, AI tools that somehow help you recognize the AI-generated calls. I was like, oh wow! I mean, this is really, it's here, it's happening. Of course, when you say that to the regulator, we will say, oh, what about the privacy? And this is also something that we put on the table. This is why I'm totally sweat because I was in Android area for the last meeting. I guess you can guess the meeting company. But indeed, I mean, these are, I think, we need to address the issues, but we don't have much time. You know, the fraudsters are all over the place. So let's just cooperate and be really active. I mean, we need to really be fast. There's no time for thinking slowly. We need to take actions, yeah.
Maybe because you asked in the beginning concrete examples and I didn't give them, so sorry for that because so a couple of examples that show how we need to collaborate with regulators and that there has to be some kind of coherence in their international regulations when it comes to fraud is, for example, as I said in the beginning, mostly all regulators are starting to put forward frameworks, guidelines, obligations, because they need to protect end users. But sometimes for parties that are working on the international space, like the company I work for, Proximus Global, it's almost impossible to comply with all the regulations. There are contradictions. So, for example, Proximus Global is a European-based company, so we have e-privacy directives that are quite stringent, AI acts, etc., GDPR that everybody knows about, of course. But there are other countries that require a level of sharing information and a level of actions to be taken that are really conflicting with e-privacy, with GDPR, and, well, not AI Act. But so when there are regulations out there that impose you to monitor the traffic, inspect the traffic, block the traffic that is fraudulent, of course, and share information about that traffic that has been blocked, that means that you need to really go deep into the traffic, be it voice or data or SMS, to be able to extract all that information. But that is so much conflicting, as Katya, the other Katya, was saying, with some of the European obligations that we have, that then, okay, how do we make it? It's very difficult. How do you interpret things to get to keep on doing the business that you are supposed to be doing, which is eventually enabling traffic, enabling communications, keeping them safe. So it's very, very difficult. Another example also of this, how this collaboration on the regulatory level is a must also, because I think from the industry perspective is more obvious. In one of these GIRAF meetings last week, one of the regulators shared an example where they had taken a number of rules in country and they had managed to really get hold and actually get rid of mostly all of the robocalls in that country. It's a European country. And what they realized is that after a little bit of time, a few weeks, the robocalls were starting to come from the neighboring countries. And that made all individuals, citizens in the country very vulnerable because they have so much interaction with the neighboring countries that they're used to having a lot of calls back and forth. So we have said it here a few times. Fraudsters are very agile, more than we are. They have no rules, so they need to comply with nothing at all but making money. So we really need to step forward and be a little bit faster also in collaborating, in not setting boundaries that sometimes hinder our ability to run proper business and to fight fraud. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. If I may, I don't want to monopolize this panel, sorry. But when I was in that panel, actually with the Commission, my main statement, it was then also used in the social media, where I just said, please, no more new regulation. Because I think, you know, it doesn't, we see that it doesn't solve the problem. okay? It is still here. So I think that what you have, the framework, is here. Let's try to implement it, but let's do that in a good, smart way. So try to be, as harmonized as possible, especially in Europe, one single market. And then let's fight this fraud with some more agile pieces. So that's why I'm so much promoting these guidelines and best practice sharing. I can give you an insight. In 2 weeks, I'm expecting a document from ENISA, actually, on smishing, on mitigating smishing. I think it's a good document that I'm hoping will somehow, be a scene setter for some further work, so we can really then, come up with the guidelines. But then again, it's not a work of NRAs, it's not a work of governments. This is, again, a cooperation, and you need to have industry at the table, okay? Because in the end, if the guidelines cannot be implemented because, it's not possible to do that, then, of course, who will benefit from that? So again, when we have this, this is why I like, for example, this BEREC ecosystem, where we organize lots of workshops and we always invite stakeholders. So being operators, being vendors, equipment producers, so on. And this is how I think we also met with Katja. So I think that now we are getting there, that we need to do that much more, get much more involvement. And if I'm already promoting BEREC so much, I would say that yesterday just we launched a call for input. So all the stakeholders are kindly invited to give their inputs for the work program for 26, actually. So, and this topic is also one of the topics that we need to dig in, so security and as well resilience of the networks. And here I shall stop because I see the red numbers here.
I'd like to also just intervene and comment on the point regarding the regulations. So as we talked about, traditionally there hasn't been any regulation. The regulation is now being demanded by the industry. And of course, the regulation is going to just apply to the national jurisdictions. We need international cooperation for the international, transactions like communication, and that is where the best practices from the MEF, whether it be MEF or forums like Giraffe, come into play. And we need to also, I think, it's important to, have accountability of where the fraud is originating from. So we don't want some, jurisdictions where your fraud is originating and then affecting other countries. So it's important to identify, through the delivery chain, where the source of the fraud is. We also talked about how sophisticated the fraudsters are and how quickly they are able to adapt and be agile. And so we also need to, over here, it's a good forum to just talk about also, if we, for example, see that, fraud is more prevalent on the SMS, A2P SMS, and we try to find out some solutions and measures to prevent that. We see that they are going on to other channels like, WhatsApp, or going on to, for example, RCS or iMessage and so on. And that is where we have less control over. Of course, we know that these OTTs, they do have their own self-reporting mechanisms, but they're not always very effective, at least from our perspective, because we're not able to have any visibility of, where the fraudsters are and so on, especially for WhatsApp, let's say. We're seeing this as an increasing trend, and we would like, from this forum to also have some sort of, a joint cooperation that can result in more effective control on those OTT players.
Yeah, I think this is probably magic to the ears of a lot of the audience here, especially we don't need more regulation. I think a lot of people would like that, to hear that. It's funny because in one of our meetings yesterday, we were talking about a working group that MEF has been running for the last couple of years around building just some high-level principles. So we took a step back. At first, we were getting into the weeds, and we were putting together this really detailed document, and we thought, wow, this is crazy. And we thought, what about just some high-level principles, some fundamentals that we think everyone could agree to, and if we could get a maybe lack of a better word, buy-in on these high-level principles, share them with regulators, get your input. It sounds like there's that openness there, and we could start baby steps at a regional level, get a buy-in around these guiding principles, and then move it wider. And I think that would be a great way forward. Sharon, I think I want to give you the last word if you have some final comments, and then I want to give a few minutes to the audience to ask one or two questions.
Okay, well, I suppose, like, I really feel that collaboration is key to all of this, and that we need to build an ecosystem on the good side that will be able to fight the ecosystem on the bad side. But actually, coming back, you were talking about education, Katja. That's crucial as well, because the public in general feel like they've been left to the sharks. They feel that nobody's doing anything, because we're not really telling them what we're doing much either. We're not very good at communicating, I feel, in the regulatory space. So people feel like nothing is happening. And at that point, you feel like everyone is terrified. They won't answer calls. They won't, they get a text. They nearly have a heart attack unless, it's terrible. But education is crucial, because it has been shown, I'm sure it's the same everywhere, that it's the under 35s who are really falling foul of this, because they're so used to clicking things and, trusting everything. So I would agree, education needs to start very young in school, digital literacy and all of that. So again, very holistic, everything is needed.
Absolutely, thanks. Look, we have a few minutes left. I'm wondering if anybody would like to ask any questions. There we go.
Hi, Dean Smith. I've got a bit of a cold, sorry. From, excuse me, Symmetry Solutions in the UK. I've been a professional fraud manager in telco for over 30 years. So I'm interested to hear what you're defining as fraud and what you're trying to actually address, because there are many types of fraud that affect the space, and in particular in messaging. So, and some are more focused on scamming end users, for example. Others affect operators. Others affect enterprise clients. So rather than have this big fraud word, what is it specifically you're trying to target?
I don't know, NRAs, usually, regulators, they're addressing, let's say, number spoofing and smishing and...
Yeah, mobile. We're really looking at the consumer more than businesses, because that's who our obligation is to. We protect the consumer. So in ComReg, we introduced a raft of things like mobile CLI, so fixed CLI blocking, so Irish numbers can't be ringing in from outside, and mobile numbers can't ring in unless they're roaming, and the sender ID. And but I suppose we need legislation then for the SMS firewall as such, and there'll be voice firewalls and all of that. But again, I suppose, as you said, fraud is a big word, and so this needs to be, that's what I'm saying, it needs to be very all-encompassing, and there's no point in us doing one thing and you're doing something similar and nobody knows, and everyone's reinventing the wheel, as it were. So that's why I would think this ecosystem, like things like Barrick and...
I'll give you the mic right away, just to add on. But on the other level, or for example, this cooperation with the NIS Cooperation Group and ENISA, here we are also doing a lot on, like, for example, some best practices for mitigating DDoS attacks. This is for operators. So there's also lots of work now starting for operators as well, so for the industry side. It is not, but on the NRA level, it is much more for consumers.
Yeah, and to clarify, so where we started this collaboration, industry and regulators, is when, so we came from the fact there's a lack of trust in the traditional communication means, in voice calls, in SMSs. So rarely, if you receive a call from a number you don't know, you're never going to answer. Probably you're well educated on fraud, and most people are starting to be. So that's how we started. We need to get trust back for end users and for businesses into the means of communications that we have, which are voice and SMS. And that affects also P2P SMS and A2P SMS, all of it. So that's where we started. Fraud is very vast. There are many different kinds of fraud. We cannot do everything at one time, but that's where we have started because we thought it was the most critical thing. Also because of these national regulations, sometimes we're having a negative impact on the actual communication. So we were not enabling communications to pursue, even the legitimate ones. And because, as I said in the beginning, at times these regulations are very contradictory and create a lot of complexity for implementation and to decide, okay, which regulation will I respect? Because at times you cannot do it all. Especially when you're in the international space. So this is where we are focusing at the moment. Not all of it,
Just thank you, and just final comment. Don't forget the corporates as users of telecoms as well. I mean, they get hammered a lot by fraud, especially one-time password and A2P and so on. And actually, consumers get affected by that as well, because the capacity for those corporations is taken up with fraud traffic. So please incorporate all of it, not just the user side only.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Looks like we are pretty much out of time. I hope there weren't any other questions, and thank you, panel, so much. Thank you, audience. Cheers. All right.